The Galactic Empire prided itself on many things: technological supremacy, tactical brilliance, and the ability to conquer lesser species without so much as breaking a sweat. Unfortunately, humans had not received the memo. Admiral Zalvorin sat in his warship's command center, swirling a goblet of iridescent blue liquid in his clawed fingers, watching a live feed of the invasion below. Earth was a backwater world, barely worthy of notice, yet here he was, overseeing what was essentially pest control. The humans, with their primitive projectile-based weapons and laughable reliance on strategy, were nothing more than a curiosity. "Have they surrendered yet?" he asked, voice thick with boredom. His second-in-command, a lean, four-eyed officer named Rilveth, adjusted his uniform and cleared his throat. "The human forces are resisting, but it's hardly worth mentioning, Admiral. Their weapons are still dependent on," he smirked, "kinetic energy." Zalvorin nearly choked on his drink. "Kinetic energy? Are you telling me they still throw tiny metal bits at high speeds and call it a weapon?" He let out a wheezing laugh, slapping his knee. "And they expect to win against plasma shielding." Rilveth chuckled politely. "It would seem so, sir. Their projectiles are crude, lacking any form of guided telemetry. Their most powerful weapons rely on outdated chemical propulsion, making them completely inferior to—" Wait. I have to hear this myself." Zalvorin activated the ship's audio feed, tuning into the humans' communication channels. A static-filled voice came through. "Repeat, hold position. Enemy energy weapons have a charge delay. Make them fire first. Snipers, take out their officers." Zalvorin raised an eyebrow. "Did they just say snipers?" Rilveth frowned. "It's an archaic term for single operatives using long-range kinetic weapons. Essentially, they fire from hiding spots and—" "I know what a sniper is, Rilveth. I just assumed those fossils went extinct with the invention of decent targeting systems." Zalvorin dismissed the idea with a flick of his hand. "Send in our shock troops. Let's put these snipers in their place." Down on the surface, the first wave of galactic soldiers advanced into the rocky terrain, shimmering under the protective fields of their armor. The mountain region was of no tactical importance, but eliminating resistance there would send a message. Earth was doomed, and they should just accept it. A veteran squad of the Empire's finest, the Stormfang Division, moved in tight formation, their visors scanning for any sign of movement. They were confident, experienced, and completely certain of their invulnerability. Until the first one dropped. There was no flash of light, no obvious explosion, just a sickening crack, and suddenly Captain Vresh's head ceased to exist. The remaining troops froze. The body hit the ground a second later. Sergeant Drellnock blinked. Did his helmet malfunction? Another shot rang out. The trooper standing next to him collapsed, a neat hole where his eye used to be. "Sniper!" someone shouted. "Impossible!" barked Drellnock, ducking behind a rock. "They can't penetrate our shields." Another shot. Another soldier fell. Drellnock's confusion turned to horror. Somehow, impossibly, the human bullets were punching through their energy fields, rendering them as useful as decorative glow sticks. A voice crackled over their comms. "Command, we're taking precision fire. We need immediate." Crack. Silence. High above, aboard his ship, Admiral Zalvorin watched the display flicker as squad after squad vanished from the battlefield. His smirk faded. "Rilveth," he said slowly, "why are my troops dying?" Rilveth, for once, had no sarcastic remark ready. He swallowed hard. "It appears the human kinetic weapons are defective, sir." "Effective? Effective?" Zalvorin threw his goblet against the console, sending shards scattering. "My soldiers have been slaughtering lesser races for centuries. We are the finest military force in the galaxy, Rilveth. I demand an explanation for how monkeys with metal sticks are tearing them apart." Rilveth ran his fingers over his console, eyes darting between tactical reports. It seems, sir, that they are utilizing high-caliber rounds designed for long-range engagements. Their snipers are striking from hidden positions and, well, sir, they're very good at it. Zalvorin rubbed his temples. You mean to tell me that our troops are being taken out by some ancient hunting method? This is ridiculous. I agree, sir. Rilvetha's voice wavered. Yet, the evidence is clear. On the surface, Drelnok and his remaining troops scrambled for cover, but there was nowhere to hide. Every time one of them made a move, a shot rang out. Each bullet arrived before they could hear the sound. Their advanced armor meant nothing. Their training meant nothing. We need to fall back, one soldier whimpered. We don't retreat. Drelnok snarled. We are the Empire's elite. We... Crack. Drelnok's last words never left his throat. Panic spread like wildfire. Soldiers abandoned their posts, sprinting back down the mountain, tossing aside their weapons in terror. The mighty Stormfang division, the pride of the Empire, was fleeing, broken and humiliated. Back on the warship, the Admiral stared at the casualty reports. The numbers were rising. The human losses? Barely a fraction. He exhaled slowly. This is unacceptable. Rilveth remained silent. Zalvorin's fingers tightened around the edges of his command chair. Deploy the assassins, he muttered. Rilvetha's head snapped up. Sir, you heard me. If these snipers insist on hiding, then we'll send something worse into the shadows. The Death Blades will handle this. A moment of hesitation. Sir, with all due respect, our Deathblade units are specialists in close-range elimination. If they can't locate the enemy, they'll locate them, Zalvorin growled. And when they do, I want these human relics wiped from existence. Rilveth nodded stiffly and turned away, but even as he relayed the order, a troubling thought gnawed at him. The humans weren't fighting like a desperate species on the brink of extinction. They weren't blindly throwing bodies into the fight. They weren't making mistakes. They were hunting. And the worst part, they were enjoying it. Sergeant Ethan Hayes had the patience of a saint and the trigger finger of a devil. He lay flat on his stomach, nestled between jagged rocks, his rifle steady as a stone slab. The wind howled around him, but he barely noticed. His eyes were locked onto the shimmering outlines of the Galactic Empire's finest, scurrying around like ants that had just discovered fire. Hayes smirked. They weren't laughing anymore. The aliens had strutted onto Earth like they were some kind of cosmic landlords here to collect rent. Plasma rifles, energy shields, fancy armor that probably cost more than an entire tank battalion. None of it mattered if you didn't know how to fight a war where you couldn't even see your enemy. One of the lizards, at least they looked like lizards if lizards had 4 eyes and an attitude problem, was trying to drag a fallen comrade behind a boulder. Noble effort. Hayes exhaled slowly. Crack. The alien's helmet snapped backward, and his body slumped like a puppet with cut strings. The remaining troops dove for cover, their shields flickering on reflex. Hayes chuckled. They still thought their fancy tech was going to save them. Plasma shielding was great against lasers and explosives, but against a .50 caliber tungsten round, moving at nearly 3,000 feet per second, that was like trying to block a sledgehammer with a paper towel. The radio crackled in his ear. Hayes status. Day, Captain. Hayes drawled, his Australian accent thick despite years of military life. Got some new friends downrange. Seem a bit jittery, though. Captain Reynolds sighed. Hayes, how many? Lost count after the first 5. They keep sticking their heads out. So I keep educating em. A pause. Then, and the assassins? Right. The assassins. Hayes rolled his shoulders, still watching the battlefield through his scope. The first wave of aliens had been soldiers, well-trained, disciplined, overconfident. The second wave was supposed to be something worse. Deathblades, the Empire's top-tier killers. Silent, efficient, masters of stealth and close-quarters combat. Hayes found the whole idea hilarious. Close-quarters combat? Against a sniper? That was like bringing a butter knife to a drone strike. I assume they're on their way, Hayes said, adjusting his sights. Or they're already here and just real bad at their job. A flicker of movement caught his attention. Something not like the other soldiers. Lower profile, moving differently. One of the assassins, maybe? He shifted his aim, waited. The thing froze, barely peeking around a tree trunk. It was trying to spot him. Hayes almost felt bad for it. Crack! A headless corpse collapsed into the dirt. The radio buzzed again. Was that one of them? Reynolds asked. Hayes checked through his scope. Yep. The body was wearing a lighter armor variant. Streamlined for speed. Sure looked like it. A long silence. Then, they sent stealth operatives against you? Yep. They do know what a sniper is, right? You'd think so. Hayes adjusted his position, inching backward so his silhouette blended better with the terrain. He knew better than to stay in one spot too long. The aliens might be slow learners, but eventually they'd stop walking straight into his bullets. Maybe. More movement. This time, multiple figures, low to the ground, weaving through the trees. Ah, there we go. The rest of the Deathblades had finally figured out that standing upright made them easy targets. Hayes smiled. It wouldn't save them. He let them get closer. One of them raised a scanning device, likely trying to pick up his body heat. Cute. It had probably worked against lesser opponents. Too bad Hayes had wrapped himself in a thermally insulated ghillie suit. As far as their tech was concerned, he was just another rock. He exhaled. Crack. One down. The others scattered like cockroaches when the lights came on. Smart. Hayes didn't shoot again immediately. He could have. His instinct screamed at him to keep picking them off one by one. But that wasn't how you really broke an enemy. You made them wait. Hayes let them sweat. He stayed absolutely still, counting heartbeats. The assassins ducked into cover, clearly debating their next move. One of them made a mistake. A nervous twitch, a shift in position. Just a few inches. But for Hayes, that was plenty. Crack. The body slumped forward. The remaining two assassins were officially out of their depth. Hayes grinned, reaching for his radio. So, Captain, he said, voice full of amusement, do I get a medal if I take out the whole invasion myself, or just finish the job, Hayes? Yes, sir. One of the last two aliens made a break for it, abandoning stealth entirely. Desperation did that to people. Hayes let him run. 5 steps. 10. 15. Then crack. The body tumbled down the hillside. The final assassin remained motionless, probably hoping if he stayed still long enough, Hayes would magically forget he was there. It didn't work. A slow squeeze of the trigger. One last crack. Then silence. Hayes sighed, stretching his arms. Well, he muttered, that was fun. The radio buzzed. Hayes! How many did you get? Hayes tilted his head, mentally counting. 12? Maybe 13? Hard to keep track. A pause. Then, you're a menace. Thank you, sir. Down below, the remaining Galactic soldiers, who had been watching the entire thing, lost their collective minds. Panic spread like wildfire. Some ran for their ships. Others threw down their weapons and just collapsed, unable to process what had just happened. Hayes watched it all unfold, smiling to himself. This was why snipers were so effective. It wasn't just about the kill count. It was about what it did to the enemy's mind. The Galactic Empire had come in thinking humans were nothing more than an inconvenience. Now, they were learning what real fear felt like. And Hayes wasn't even done yet. Admiral Zalvorn was having a bad day. He had started the morning with absolute certainty that humanity would fall within hours. The conquest of Earth was supposed to be a textbook operation. Send in troops, overwhelm resistance, and collect another victory for the Empire. Instead, he was now watching his finest soldiers collapse into chaos, routed by an enemy that wasn't even visible. This is unacceptable. He slammed a fist onto the console, causing a few terrified bridge officers to flinch. We are the mightiest force in the galaxy. We do not lose to primitive creatures with metal sticks. Rilveth, his second-in-command, shuffled uncomfortably. Sir, the enemy's tactics are proving more effective than anticipated. Zalvorin turned slowly. Tactics? You mean sit in a bush and shoot things? Yes, sir. That is not a tactic, Rilveth. That is what animals do. This is supposed to be a war. Of course, sir. Rilveth swallowed hard. But the troops are, requesting reinforcements. Zalvorin's eyes narrowed. Reinforcements? Yes, sir. They're panicking. A garbled transmission blared from the console, cutting through the tension. A frantic voice, almost screeching. They're everywhere. We can't see them. We can't. Crack. Static. The entire bridge was silent. Zalvorin inhaled slowly, his hands tightening into fists. Fine, he said through gritted teeth. Deploy the heavy walkers. Bombard the entire region. If we can't see them, we'll turn the battlefield into molten slag. Rilveth hesitated. Sir, our own troops are still. Did I ask for an opinion? And no, sir. Then do it. Down on the surface, the surviving Galactic soldiers were in full retreat. A sniper's bullet was one thing. A sniper's psychological warfare was another. Sergeant Ethan Hayes watched them scatter through his scope, sighing. I'm almost offended, he muttered into his radio. I put in all this effort, and they don't even want to fight back. Captain Reynolds' voice crackled in. You've done enough damage, Hayes. You might want to move. I'm seeing some real big red blips on the scanner. Big. Walkers. Hayes groaned. Ugh. Of course they'd send the Mechs. A distant rumble confirmed the news. Heavy assault walkers. 20-foot-tall armored brutes with plasma cannons that could turn a city block into a glass parking lot were stomping their way toward his position. Hayes took a moment to reflect. A lesser man might have panicked. A lesser man might have run. Hayes just took another bite of his energy bar. The first walker crested the ridge, its sleek black armor glinting under the sun. Its turret swiveled, scanning for heat signatures. Hayes could already hear the alien pilot inside, smugly muttering about how this would finally end the battle. T was adorable. He adjusted his scope. A standard plasma walker's main weakness was the cockpit shielding. It could withstand explosive shells, energy blasts, even directed EMP waves. But it couldn't withstand a .50 caliber round threading the gap between armor plates. Hayes let out a slow breath. Crack. The walker stopped moving. Then, slowly, very slowly, it tipped over. The sound it made upon impact was something between a metallic groan and the anguished scream of 1,000 engineers realizing their design had a very obvious flaw. The second walker hesitated. Hayes grinned. They always hesitate. Crack. The second walker staggered. Not a kill shot. He had missed the sweet spot by half an inch, but the pilot definitely didn't appreciate having his main viewport shattered. The machine wobbled like a drunk before wildly firing in his general direction. Hayes didn't move. The plasma blast sailed 10 feet above him. Bless their hearts, he muttered. Another crack. The second walker collapsed next to the first. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the remaining ground troops, who had been watching from cover, dropped their weapons and ran. In his command center, Zalvorin felt something strange. Something foreign. Oh no. It was doubt. This is a fluke, he whispered. Just a statistical anomaly. One soldier can't. Another transmission interrupted him. Command, this is Squad Omega. We're losing men fast. They're dropping from now. Crack. Static. Zalvorin stared at the screen. He was beginning to suspect that the statistical anomaly had a name. The bridge officers shifted nervously. Nobody spoke. Nobody wanted to remind the Admiral that a single human had just turned their entire invasion into an intergalactic horror story. Rilveth, Zalvorin said, voice eerily calm. Why, yes, sir. What are the odds that this human could be replicated? Rilveth paled. Sir? I mean, surely this is one sniper. One particularly lucky specimen. The rest of their military can't possibly. Another officer interrupted. Sir, we're picking up distress signals across multiple battlefronts. Zalvorin froze. The officer swallowed nervously. It's not just this one sniper. Reports indicate multiple human sharpshooters engaging across every occupied zone. The kill counts are staggering. Silence. Zalvorin closed his eyes, took a deep breath, counted to 10. Then he exhaled, turned to Rilveth, and said something that no Galactic Admiral had ever said before. We need to leave. Rilveth blinked. Sir, this is not a war, Zalvorin muttered. This is a mistake. He stared at the casualty reports. The once proud numbers of his invasion force had been slashed apart, not by superior technology, not by overwhelming firepower, but by patience. A patience that only humans seemed to possess. The order was given. The withdrawal began. And down on the battlefield. As the alien ships lifted off in retreat, Sergeant Ethan Hayes took a final bite of his energy bar, dusted off his rifle, and smirked. Would you look at that? He muttered. They finally got the message. The Galactic Empire had never run from a fight. Not once in its 1,000-year history had it suffered anything resembling defeat. But as Admiral Zalvorin watched his forces scramble for their ships, stumbling over their own wounded in blind panic, he knew one thing for certain. This wasn't a war anymore. It was a disaster. The withdrawal order had been issued, but executing it was another matter. The mighty invasion fleet, once the harbinger of doom for humanity, now resembled a frantic herd of animals trying to escape a burning forest. Soldiers who had arrived with arrogance and swagger were now sprinting for their lives, tossing their weapons as if that would make them less of a target. Sergeant Ethan Hayes, still perched in his cozy little sniper nest, took a long, slow sip from his canteen. You seeing this, Cap? He said, amusement thick in his voice. Captain Reynolds' voice crackled in over the radio. I see it, Hayes. I mean, just for the record, I am watching actual intergalactic warlords trip over themselves to get off our planet. Yes, Hayes. Hayes sighed dramatically. And yet, nobody's brought me a beer. Focus, sniper. Hayes grinned, shifting his sights to one of the alien landing zones. The once orderly evacuation was turning into an uncoordinated disaster, with drop ships overloading and leaving troops behind. He watched as one alien, in a desperate attempt to squeeze onto a departing transport, shove his commanding officer off the ramp. Oh, now that's just cold, Hayes chuckled. The abandoned officer tried to scramble back up, but the ship was already lifting off, with a look of sheer betrayal on his reptilian face. He turned to the few dozen soldiers still stranded on the ground. They all exchanged glances. Then someone whispered the universal words of a man realizing he is in deep trouble. Oh no! A shadow loomed over them. The A-10 Thunderbolt came screaming down from the sky like the wrath of an angry god. The Warthog was old, ancient by modern military standards, a relic from an era long before humanity even dreamed of first contact. But when you needed something to remove enemy forces with extreme prejudice, there was no finer tool. The last thing the stranded aliens heard was the unmistakable, bone-rattling brrrrrt of the A-10's G-8 Avenger tearing reality apart. Then there was nothing. Back in orbit, Admiral Zalvorin felt something very unpleasant clawing at his chest. It took him a moment to recognize it. Dread. He turned to Rilveth, his voice a quiet hiss. How did this happen? Rilveth didn't answer. He was staring at the tactical displays, which were now flooded with distress signals. It wasn't just Hayes. Everywhere, human snipers had emerged. From cities, from forests, from mountain ridges and abandoned highways, their bullets cutting through energy shielding like it was nothing. The very foundation of galactic combat doctrine was unraveling before their eyes. This wasn't a fluke. This wasn't luck. This was war. And the humans were built for it. The few remaining warships began firing blindly at the planet below, desperate to cover their retreat. Plasma bolts lit up the atmosphere, scorching the ground in meaningless displays of violence. Then the missiles started. Dozens of streaks of light erupted from hidden silos across Earth's continents. Some were guided by satellites, others by human hands, but all of them shared a singular purpose: retribution. The first galactic cruiser didn't even get a chance to react before it was reduced to a spectacular fireball. The second ship fared no better. Its shields flickered under the relentless barrage before it. Too was erased from existence. Admiral Zalvorin grabbed the edges of his command console, watching in horror as his once invincible fleet was picked apart like a herd of wounded animals. A final transmission buzzed in from the surface. A human voice, calm and infuriatingly casual. This is Earth. If you're leaving, don't come back." Zalvorin swallowed. His hands were shaking. Rilveth turned to him. "Sir," he whispered, "we have to go." Zalvorin took one last look at the tactical screens, at the planet below, at the shattered remains of his once mighty fleet. Then, with a deep, shuddering breath, he muttered, "Retreat." The remaining galactic ships turned tail and fled, their engines burning hot as they jumped to FDL speeds, desperate to escape the horror they had unleashed. Back on the surface, Hayes watched the sky, grinning as the last enemy ship disappeared. "Well," he said, stretching his arms, "that was fun." Reynolds' voice buzzed in. "You're a menace, Hayes." "Appreciate it, Cap." He leaned back against his pack, watching the sun dip below the mountains. The war, at least this battle, was over. But Hayes had a feeling they'd be back. And when they did, they'd be better, smarter, more careful. Didn't matter. He'd still be waiting.